Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and today we're actually going to build our first video game. Many of you have played Pong before, and many of you think of Pong as a really old school game, and my grandparents played it and all that stuff. That's probably true, but what better place to start than with building a simple, fun two-player game that you can build in about an hour? Half an hour maybe, and you could put it on a flash drive and take it home and play Pong with your friends, um, all in one video. It's not going to take very long for us to build this. It's probably going to take longer if I spend more time on this intro, so I'm just going to move on. So I'm creating a new project in Unity, and I want to name it Pong. I'm going to name mine Pong-tastic because I'm sure I have like 17 Pong projects here. I want to make sure that it's a 2D project, 2D, and I want to make sure it's going to the right place in my computer. I'm going to click Create Project. I'm not going to save that project from the last video. It's going to take some time to build my game. And now, while this is building, I want to make sure you understand that the Pong resources I've given you in Canvas, you do want to download those and export those files if they're in a zipped file. You want to make sure that you have them clean and open in a folder like this, right? And you have a couple of different files that I want you to pay attention to. You have the ball.cs file. That is a script that you're going to use in your program to make it work. There's a ball.png, which is a picture. You have a dotted line.png, which is a picture. You have another script file called move racket. You have a racket PNG and a wall horizontal PNG. You need those 6 files in order to work, in order for Pong to work. And as a matter of fact, actually we'll import it differently. All right, so now I have my Unity project set up, and it's called Pongtastic. I can see the file name there, or the project name. I have my camera right there in the middle, my main camera. And I have my project panel and all that stuff down here. So we have everything ready to go. We're all set up. Okay, so the first thing I want to do after I have everything ready to go is I want to modify my camera because my camera is the first thing they gave me. Actually, no, I'm lying to you. The first thing I want to do is set up my folders so that everything stays nice and organized. I do not want my files to get out of control. Now, if I remember the assets that I have for this project, I have some scripts and I have some sprites. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to create a new folder by right-clicking on the assets folder, go to create, go to folder. I'm going to create a scripts folder. And I'm going to do the same thing to create a sprites folder. Okay, now there's another folder I need, and it's called scenes. And I will explain what a scene is in just a minute. Okay, so I have scenes, scripts, and sprites, right? Now, a scene is essentially just, think of it like a scene in a movie, right? A scene in a movie is a self-contained little play that's happening within a movie. And when you move to another scene, it might be set in a different setting. There might be different characters. There might be different things going on in that scene. And it's the same thing with a game, with a video game. You have different scenes in video games. Think of the front end menu, the main menu of a video game as a scene. And then the first level is a scene, and the second level is a scene. The nice thing is this Pong game only needs one scene, which is the game itself, because it's a very simple game. So this scene that we're in right now, the scene is called Untitled, and I can see that because right here I have the Unity logo next to the word Untitled. This shows me that this scene right here is untitled. What that tells me is that this is an unsaved. It's not a saved project. So I'm going to go to File, Save Scenes. And it's going to recognize that, oh, wait a second, you haven't saved this scene. So I'm going to put this in the Scenes folder that I just created, and I'm going to call this Main. I want this to be the main scene. So now this name changes, and if I go inside my Scenes folder, I will see I have a new scene. Okay, so now I have my scene saved. Now I want to bring in my scripts and my sprites. So let's do that. Excuse me. To import new assets into Unity, there are a couple of ways to do it, and I'm going to do it both ways so that you can kind of figure out which one is your preference. The first way to do it is to find the folder you want to put this information into, right-click, go to Import New Asset. So I'm going to click there. It's going to ask me where my assets are, and they're in the Assets folder. Oh, actually, no. They're on my desktop. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and I have my Pong resources here. And this is my scripts folder, so I want to bring in this script and that script. I want to bring both of those in and click import, and now I have two separate scripts that get imported into my scripts folder. Now, here's the thing. This is not a programming class. I am not going to be teaching you computer programming in this class. I will give you scripts that I've written that will work in your game to make your game work. If you are interested in learning computer programming, meaning you're interested in figuring out what all this stuff means and you want to learn how to write your own scripts, I have a year-long computer programming class that you can take. Please take that class. It is very, very helpful for learning game development. This class is more focused on the structure of a video game, how they work, and the artwork and the game design itself. All right. So I will give you all the scripts you need. So those are your scripts. Now, the other way to bring in stuff is just to do it through the File Explorer. So I have my Pong resources folder. Let's open up my assets here. Oh, that's the wrong assets folder. Here we go, Pongtastic. Go to my assets folder. I have my scenes, scripts, and sprites, and I want to bring in some sprites. So I'll go to my sprites folder. And all of these PNGs, I'm just going to bring them over into my sprites folder. Okay, these two as well. Just drop those in. Perfect. Now notice that whenever I bring over files that way, what happens is it actually brings them over, it just sends them over. If I bring in files by importing content through Unity, it makes a copy of it and then brings that over. So that's the big difference between the two. But essentially they do the same thing. I have my assets where they need to be, and now I can start working on my game. Okay, first thing I need to do is I need to modify my camera. So I'm going to click my main camera here, and I'm going to make sure my background color is set to black. I want it to be pitch black because Pong has a black background. Okay. I want to set the size of my camera to be 40. It's going to be a big, big camera because these assets are going to be pretty big when we bring them in. So I have a size 40 camera. I want to make sure that I turn off HDR because I don't need it. This is an old school game. I want it to kind of look cool and old school. And MSAA. And you don't need to know what these are right now. We'll talk about that when we get into more graphically intensive games, but we can just turn that stuff off right now. All right, now I want to actually build the walls of my game. So the nice thing is I have my sprites here, and I can just bring my sprites into, oh, and I'm missing one. I have a horizontal. Oh, I know what happened. In the last video, I dragged some files over and I dragged my vertical walls into the last project. There we go. Let's do that. Oh, boom. All right. Yeah. All right. So now I have my vertical walls in there as well. Now, I have these sprites, and I can just actually start dumping sprites into the game. But the problem is these sprites are very, very tiny. They're very small. So I want to set it up so that the sprite actually is big enough whenever I bring it in. And the way I'm going to do that is by changing this value called pixels per unit. Basically, it just says each of these boxes, how many pixels does it actually represent? Right now, this box represents 100 by 100 pixels, or it represents 100 pixels. If I set my pixels per unit to 1 and then hit apply, I can bring in my wall and it's actually bigger and it looks good in my game, right? So that's what I want to do. But I want to turn off some other stuff here. So my pixels per unit is going to be 1. I also want to turn off my filter. I do not want a filter applied to this information, to these sprites, because again, this is an old school game, so I don't want any fancy filtering and stuff like that. I'm going to hit apply, and I'm going to do that for all 5 of these objects. So I'm going to change the pixels per unit to 1, turn off the filter, hit apply. Change the pixels per unit to 1, turn off the filter, and hit apply. 1, no filter, apply, and 1, no filter, apply. Okay, now I can start building my game area. So I'm just going to drag out 2 verticals and 2 horizontals. Now I want this to be dead center in the middle of my game space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this top option here, or this top horizontal line, and instead of actually having to figure out which one is which, I'm going to go in here and rename these really quickly. So this is my top, so I'm going to rename this to top. I'm going to rename this to bottom. I'm going to rename this one to left, and rename this one to right. Okay, so now those are renamed, and all I did was just double click, oh, not double click, I right-clicked and hit rename. Another thing you can do is when you click it, if you see over here in the inspector, there's a name there, you can actually just type it in there, in that name. All right. Okay, so now I have my 4 wall sections in here, and I want to make sure that these are dead center horizontally, and these are dead center vertically. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to hold Shift or Control and click on the bottom one. And I'm going to set the position. Actually, no, we need to do these individually. I'm going to click that. I'm going to set the position to be 0 on the x-axis. And I will set the position to be here to be 0 on the x-axis as well. And 0 on the y-axis for this. And 0 on the y-axis for that. Now, it still doesn't work because it's not a box anymore. It's not really a box. So what I need to do is figure out how to bring these in so that they fit perfectly here. So it's 0 on the y. It's at x negative 49. Well, that's going to definitely be too far over. If I make it x 0, then it puts it right there, and that's not what I want. So let's put it at, say, x, I don't know, negative 25. Ooh, that's pretty close. Look at that. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty close. Maybe negative 24. That's going to be a little hangover. Let's do negative 24.5. And honestly, that looks almost like it lines up perfectly. Now this has to come down just a little bit. So we'll bring that down to, say, 17, maybe 16. Ooh, perfect. You see how that perfectly lines up? Now the reason why I'm using these values over here is because it's much easier than trying to drag and move with the mouse and line things up perfectly. All right. So that's good there. Now, because this is negative 24.5, I can probably assume that this is going to be positive 24.5, and it will work perfectly. And it does. And the same thing here. This is positive 16. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a negative 16 on the y, and it should work perfectly. And it does. So now I have my game, I have my gameplay area. And when I click on it, I can see maybe the camera is a little bit too big, so I can bring the camera down to, say, 35, maybe 30, maybe 25. Getting closer. Let's try 20. Perfect. So now my camera is at 20. The gameplay area fits perfectly within those boxes, and that looks pretty good. All right, awesome. Now what I can do is I can add what's called a box collider around these objects. Now, what you may be wondering what a box collider is. Well, right now, these wall sections aren't really walls. They're just artwork that are sitting out there in the game space. There's nothing telling objects that they can't pass those wall sections, right? So we need to attach something to that wall that says you can't pass this, right? So what we do is we add what's called a collider. And a collider will check for any objects that also have a collider to see if those objects are interfering with each other. So the way we're going to do that is just click one of these, doesn't really matter. And we can go over here to the inspector. We can select Add Component. And in the Add Component section, we have this option called Physics 2D. And right there we have a box collider. Now notice we have 6 different colliders that we can choose from. We have a box, a circle, an edge, polygon, capsule, composite. We want to use a box because this is a rectangular object. If I click Box Collider 2D, you may not have noticed a difference, but 2 things happened. One, we have this new box collider section in the inspector. And 2, if I zoom in here, you may be able to see a very faint green outline running along the edge of my object. That is showing me the actual collider as it exists on that object. So now this object has a box collider around it. And we need to do the same thing for all of our other objects. So I'm actually going to do it all at the same time. I'm going to select my left, my right, and my bottom objects. Click Add Component, Box Collider. So now all of these objects have box colliders around them, and objects with colliders won't be able to move through these if we tell it not to. Perfect. Okay. All right, next what we want to do is we want to add a dotted line down the middle of our game so that we can kind of see the difference between the left half and the right half of the screen. So we have this cool dotted line sprite here. And as long as you set your pixels per unit to 1 and you set your filter to none, we can drag the dotted line out here in the middle and just kind of put it at 0, 0 on our position. And so now we have this dotted line going down the middle of our screen. Now, we don't want a box collider around this because we want the ball to be able to pass through the dotted line, right? We want it to just be there as decoration. So we're not going to add a box collider to this object here. Next, we want to bring our rackets in. So I'm going to add 1 racket to this side of the game and 1 racket to that side of the game. And we can position our rackets wherever we want, but the one thing we want to make sure is that our rackets are exactly the same distance away from the wall, because we don't want one player to have an unfair advantage. So I'm going to set this racket to -22, and I will set this racket to +22 on the X. That way there's enough of a gap in between so you can see the difference between the wall and the paddle, but there's also not too much of a difference, and it's the same for both sides. All right, now this paddle, we want the ball to be able to collide with the paddle. So we want to add a box collider around the paddles themselves. So I'm going to grab both rackets and add a collider, Physics 2D, box collider. So now the rackets have box colliders. The other thing that we need to do is we want to rename our rackets so that they work with our scripts, because we're about to attach scripts to these rackets. So one thing we need to do is let's look at our racket script here, and what this says, let's see. Oh, you know what? That's fine. We can name these whatever. But I'm just going to name this one, let's rename this left racket. I'm going to rename this one right racket. Okay. So now our rackets are renamed. We need to add 2 more things. One thing we need to add to these rackets is called a rigid body 2D. Now, a rigid body is actually a pretty simple concept with a very complicated name. Basically, anything that you want to actually move in your game needs to have a rigid body attached to it. A rigid body just basically says, this is an object to which we can apply the laws of physics. We can apply physics and programming to this object to make it do things based on player input. So if you want it to move through the game, or if you want it to move on its own without player input, it still needs a rigid body attached to it. So The way we do that is we go to Add Component, Physics 2D, and the top option is Rigidbody 2D. I'm going to add that. Now let's take a look at this section really quick because this is really important. One thing that's really important here is mass. Mass is going to indicate how heavy the object is. We want to make sure that the mass of the object isn't so much that it throws off the physics of our game. For this game, a mass of 1 for these rackets is pretty good, as long as the ball isn't more massive than the rackets. If the ball is more massive than the racket, when the ball hits the racket will start flying off in a weird space, right? So we want the ball to be super light and the rackets to be heavy. Another thing we want to look at is gravity scale. If my gravity scale is set to 1, that means my rackets will fall down at a rate of 1 on the gravity scale. And if I play my game, I can see that that actually happens once it decides to play. So you can see my racket just fell to the bottom of the game. Now, why didn't it fall off the bottom of the screen? Well, because it has a box collider, and so does this bottom wall. So now I know my box colliders are working, but I need to change that gravity scale. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change that to 0 so my racket won't fly off the screen. And I'm going to do the same thing for my right racket as well. I'm going to add a Physics 2D rigid body. I'm going to change the gravity scale to 0, and then I will test my game again just to make sure my rackets don't fall off my screen. And they don't. Good. Okay, let's talk about control. Now I want to be able to move these rackets around on the screen, right? So I have this move racket script that I can attach to my rackets that will actually allow them to move. So I'm going to do that. And the way we attach scripts, again, there's a couple ways, and I'll show you the first way here. What I can do is click on the left racket, go down to Add Component, go down to Scripts here, and find the script I want to attach. You want to attach the Move Racket script to the racket. So I'm going to click Move Racket, and it's going to give me some options. I can set it to its movement speed. I can change its movement speed to be whatever I want. Change it back to 30, and I can change the axis that controls this racket, which I will talk about in a minute. So that's one way to add a script, is to do it through here. Another way is to grab the script itself and just drag it on top of the object you want it to be applied to. So now my right racket has the Move Racket script, and my left racket has the Move Racket script. Now if I play the game, I should be able to move my rackets up and down in the screen by hitting the up and down arrows. And they do, and that's perfect. So now if I had a ball bouncing back and forth, I would be able to play somewhat of a game, right? But there's a problem. We want our rackets to be able to move independently because I want one player to be with the W and S key, and I want another player to move the racket up and down with the up and down arrows, right? So let's actually change what racket is controlled by what keys. Now what we need to do is we need to go to Edit, Project Settings, Input, because we need to change our key bindings here. Now, when I went to Input, it changed my inspector over here to the Input Manager. If I click this arrow next to axes, it'll show me all the control axes that I have available to me. I have 18 of them, and I have a horizontal, a vertical, fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, jump, all that stuff. Now, we're moving axes up or moving these paddles up and down in the vertical axis, right? If I look there, I can see that I have a positive button, which is up on the keypad. I have down, which is a negative button on the keypad, but I also have S and W, so for WASD movement. So I have these over here as well. Now, I want the first player to only be able to use S and W. So I'm actually going to delete all this stuff here. Just boom, 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 get rid of those. And I want my negative button to be S and my positive button to be W. So now, if we use the vertical axis, then you can only move up and down using S and W. Now, I also want to create a second player, a player 2. axis. So I'm going to increase the size of the axes that I have available to me from 18 to 19. And when I go down here to the bottom, I now have 2 cancels instead of just 1. I'm going to rename this to vertical 2. I'm going to set the positive button to be up, up. I have to actually type up. The negative button to be down. And I want to make sure I match all these options here. I don't want an alternative positive button. I want my gravity to be 3. I want my dead area to be what it is, 0.001. I want my sensitivity to be a 3 as well. I want to check this snap button. And that looks pretty good to me. So now I have 2 vertical axes. I have a vertical and vertical 2. If I click on my left racket here, I want this to be based on the vertical axis. But my right paddle, I want to be based on vertical 2, because that's the second player. Now when I play the game, I should be able to move the left with W and S, which I can, and move the right with the up and down arrows. So now I have a 2-player game with 2-player control schemes. Okay, almost done. All we have to do now is bring in our ball and make our ball bounce and control the behavior of the ball. Perfect. So I'm going to, let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead and just bring in the ball. So I'm going to go to my sprites folder down here. I'm going to make sure my ball is 1 pixel per unit and make sure that its filter is turned off. Drag the ball up here into the middle of the game space. Now there's one thing I have to do before I can attach the script. Well, there's a couple things. First of all, I need to add a box collider to the ball, and I need to add a Rigidbody 2D to the ball. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to add a Physics 2D box collider, and I'm going to add a Physics 2D Rigidbody. I'm going to set the gravity scale to 0, and I'm also going to turn the mass way down on the ball because I don't want 0.001 because I don't want this ball to be super massive. I don't want it to knock these paddles out of orientation. All right, so now my mass is set very, very low. Oh, I actually accidentally clicked auto mass and I don't want that. Okay, there's another thing I want to do here. I want to make sure that my ball doesn't rotate in the air because it is just a square. If we zoom in, it's not even a ball. It's really just a square. It's a 1 pixel by, it's literally just 1 pixel square, right? And I don't want it to rotate because these corners will cause some problems with the physics if it hits the corner of the thing. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to keep it from rotating. So in my Rigidbody, I'm going to go here to constraints, and I'm going to freeze its rotation on the z-axis so that it doesn't rotate. Okay, perfect. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make it so that the ball bounces off of things whenever it collides with them. So what I need to do is create a new material. And let's go ahead and create a new folder for materials. Create folder, materials. So I can put my physics material in here. And inside the materials folder, I want to create a new material. Okay. And that material is going to be, oh, actually, you know what? Nope, that's not what I want. Let's delete that. Delete. Not a new material. I want to create a new physics material 2D. That's what I want. And I'm going to call this ball material. Ball material. Now I want this ball material to have no friction, but I want it to have 1 bounciness, meaning it bounces off of things when it collides with them. And then all I have to do is apply this ball material to the ball itself. So if I click on the ball and I go over here, I have sprite, blah, 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 all this stuff. If I look at my box collider 2D, actually no, in my Rigidbody 2D, no, yeah, my box collider, right, because my collider is colliding with other colliders. Anyway, in my box collider, I have this material option. All I have to do is drag this ball material into this spot, and now I have a bouncy ball. It's that easy. The last thing I want to do at this point, next thing I want to do, really in the last thing for the game, is I want to attach the ball script to my ball. So I can just drag that over, attach that to the ball, and now we have a playable game of Pong. So let's play. All right. And my Pong, oh no, oh gosh, it's too fast. Oh no, oh no. And look, my paddles are rotating slightly. I need to fix that. How do I fix that? Oh, well, maybe I fix that by constraining its rotation on the z-axis. So let's do that. So let's grab my rackets, 1 and 2. And let's constrain its rotation on the z-axis, so that changes. Also, my ball's moving a little fast, so I'm going to go to the ball script and move that from 30 down to 20 so that it can go a little bit slower. And let's play it again and see what happens. Okay, so now my ball's moving a little bit slower, and that's fine. Oop, now it's going fast. Let's say I wanted to make it move slow on the first level, and then as we clear a level, I can make it faster. That you can do by creating a new scene and just changing the speed of the ball in the new scene. But at this point, we have a playable game. So this video is already pretty long, but I want to do one more thing before I quit. I want to show you how to export your project as a playable game. So once you're done, you want to save your project. So save project. You want to save your scenes. I didn't mean to click that. Just click Save Scenes. And you want to click Build Settings. Build Settings is going to allow you to build this project as this playable game. Now we're building it for PC, so I'm going to keep it at PC. I'm going to keep all these options the same, but I want to go down to Player Settings here so that I can change some things really quickly. So in Player Settings, I actually want to turn off Allow Full Screen Switch. I do not want this to be full screen. Oh, clicked the wrong thing. I want it to be a windowed game only. I want to, let's see, resolution and presentation. Default is full screen. I want to turn that off. I do not want the default to be full screen because we haven't given it any way to stop the game once it starts playing. So now that I'm sure it's not full screen, I want to also, let's see, other settings maybe. Yeah, that should be fine. Should be good, 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 good. Everything looks good here. Resolution presentation, yeah. Oh, right here, display resolution dialog. I want to disable that as well under resolution and presentation. That way it doesn't ask me what resolution I want to run the game at. And I'm going to click build, and I'm actually going to click build and run. It's going to ask me where I want to put the executable file, and I'll actually put it on the desktop. And I'm going to call this Pongtastic. And I could have chosen an icon, a special icon to, instead of the, sorry. So what I could do is I could choose a special icon that's unique to my game, and I can use that as my icon, but the default is going to be the Unity icon, and that's fine for this first project. I'm going to click Save. Oh, what happened? Where'd it go? Oh, because I named it the same thing. I'll just call it Pong. Click Save. And it's going to build my game. Now, it's going to take a little while for my game to be built. Actually, it's kind of a small game, so it shouldn't. It's building the player now. It's doing all the fun stuff to build the game. And we'll give it just a second. This video is already 35 minutes long, and it's because we had to kind of cover a lot of stuff. In the next couple of videos, all right, so now I have my made with Unity, and my game starts. and I can move my boom, and I have a playable game of Pong. It's not very much fun. Ooh, and I have a little glitch there. My ball flew out of my thing here. All right. Um, but the game's done. If I go to my desktop, I can see that I have a, where is that? I can see inside my Pongtastic folder, I have my Pong exe with my unityplayer.dll, all that stuff. This folder here, this entire project folder, is what you're going to want to send to me in Canvas. So you're going to zip this folder together by right-clicking and clicking send to, and you're going to send it to a compressed zipped folder, and that's the folder you're going to turn in this project. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, please let me know. Unity is a whole lot of fun, and I hope you're going to enjoy it because we're going to be doing a lot more projects in the coming weeks. We're going to build. We just built Pong. We're going to build Snake, Arkanoid, probably Tetris. I don't know, maybe Pac-Man, Frogger, whatever I feel like teaching you how to build. But we're going to build a bunch of old school games this first term, so we can get you know practice in building new video games. All right, so I'm going to stop talking. That was plenty enough for me. Please turn in your Pong projects, however far you get in the project. It doesn't matter. Please just turn it in. And then we will begin working on our next project next week. Thanks for paying attention. I'll see you next time.